The sound of galloping hooves is more than just an auditory hallucination. It is a rhythmic pulse that has echoed through the corridors of human history for over 2 millennia. In the final, most mysterious book of the Christian Bible, the Book of Revelation, written by John of Patmos while in exile, we find a vision so powerful it has shaped our very understanding of the end of the world. Imagine a celestial throne room, a place of blinding light and cosmic significance, where the Lamb, a figure of supreme divine authority, holds a scroll sealed with 7 seals. As each seal is broken, a new chapter of human destiny is unleashed, and the first 4 of these revelations are the most iconic, the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. The atmosphere in this divine court is heavy with anticipation, a dramatic tension that bridges the gap between the eternal and the terrestrial. Before we continue this journey through the shadows of prophecy, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. When the Lamb breaks the first seal, the silence is shattered by the thunder of a white horse. Its rider carries a bow and is given a crown, riding out as a conqueror bent on conquest. This figure is perhaps the most debated of the 4. To some, the white horse symbolizes a righteous victory or the spread of the gospel across nations. However, many scholars and theologians suggest a much darker interpretation: the Antichrist. This rider represents the deceptive nature of tyranny, a force that often arrives under the guise of peace, order, and salvation, only to enslave the spirit of humanity. The crown is not earned, but given. The bow, lacking arrows in many ancient depictions, suggests a victory achieved through intimidation, diplomacy, or psychological warfare before a single drop of blood is spilled. It is the archetype of the charismatic leader who promises a new world order, only to lead society into a trap of its own making. This is the birth of empire, the relentless drive to expand and dominate that has fueled the rise and fall of civilizations. As the second seal is torn away, the air turns cold, and a fiery red horse emerges from the void. Its rider does not carry a bow of distance, but a great sword of intimate, brutal violence. This is the horseman of war. His specific mission is to take peace from the earth and to make people slaughter one another. Unlike the strategic conquest of the white horse, the red horse represents the raw, chaotic energy of internal conflict. It is the breakdown of the social contract where neighbor turns against neighbor. This symbolism distinguishes between organized military expansion and the terrifying reality of civil strife and total war. When the red horse gallops, the structures of law and order dissolve into a bloody mire. It represents the moment when the peace of a nation is replaced by the edge of the sword, turning brother against brother in a frenzy of survival. To understand the weight of these visions, we must look at the world of John of Patmos. For the inhabitants of the first-century Roman Empire, these were not abstract metaphors, but lived realities. The white horse mirrored the Roman thirst for expansion and the triumphal processions of conquering generals. The red horse mirrored the internal revolutions and the bloody succession crises, like the year of the 4 emperors, that frequently tore the empire apart from within. These figures represent a recurring cycle. The ambitious leader creates an empire, and the inherent violence of that system eventually triggers its own destruction. Psychologically, these 2 horsemen tap into our deepest collective fears. Conquest and war are the twin pillars of human suffering, representing the loss of autonomy and the loss of life. They remind us that the thin veneer of civilization is always just one broken seal away from total collapse. This is only the beginning of the end. When the Lamb breaks the 3rd seal, the sound of galloping shifts from the thunder of war to a heavy tread. Out of the darkness emerges a black horse. Its rider does not carry a weapon, holding instead a pair of scales. This is the horseman of famine, and his appearance signals a terrifying shift from physical violence to economic strangulation. In the vision of John of Patmos, a voice rings out among the living creatures, specifying the cost of survival, a quart of wheat for a day's wages, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages. These are not arbitrary numbers. They represent a world where the basic necessities of life have become luxuries. It is a portrait of hyperinflation, where a full day of labor only earns enough food to keep one person alive, leaving nothing for the family. This horseman represents the slow death of scarcity. Yet, there is a hauntingly specific command given to this rider. Do not damage the oil and the wine. This cryptic instruction highlights a paradox that has persisted through time. While the poor struggle for a handful of grain, the luxuries of the wealthy, symbolized by the oil and wine, remain untouched and protected. This represents the weaponization of resources and the widening chasm between the elite and the destitute during times of crisis. The black horse is a symbol of economic injustice, where the systems designed to sustain life are used to control it. It is the famine that follows the sword, the inevitable consequence of scorched fields and broken supply chains that the red horse left in its wake. When the economy becomes a tool of war, the black horse is the one who carries the ledger. The atmosphere of the throne room grows even more oppressive as the fourth seal is torn away. This time, there is no ambiguity about his identity. He sits upon a pale horse, a word translated from the Greek chloros, which evokes a sickly, yellowish-green hue, the color of decaying flesh. This is death, the only rider explicitly named in the text, but he does not travel alone. Close behind him follows Hades, the personification of the grave, acting as a grim harvester who collects what death mows down. If the first 3 horsemen represent the causes of human misery, the fourth is the final effect. This duo represents the end of earthly ambition and the silent, cold reality that follows the chaos of conquest and conflict. Together, Death and Hades are granted authority over a fourth of the earth. This fourfold judgment is executed through 4 distinct means: the sword, famine, plague, and the wild beasts of the earth. In biblical numerology, the number 4 represents the world and its totality, like the earth's 4 corners. To give authority over a quarter of the globe suggests a catastrophe of such magnitude that it shakes the foundations of human existence. It is the culmination of the domino effect. Conquest led to war, war led to famine, and famine created the perfect breeding ground for pestilence and the breakdown of human dominance over the natural world. Even the wild beasts, sensing the weakness of a dying civilization, move in to reclaim the ruins of man. For John of Patmos, these were not distant fantasies. He lived in an era where the Roman sword was a threat, and localized famines were common due to administrative greed. The pale horse would have resonated deeply with a population that lived in fear of the great mortality, the plagues that could wipe out entire cities. From a medical perspective, the sickly green of the pale horse has become a universal symbol for pestilence. Throughout history, from the Black Death to the Spanish flu, the hoofbeats of the pale horse have been heard in every hospital ward. These events prove that the horsemen are not just figures of a far-off future, but recurring shadows that haunt the human story, reminding us of our fragility against forces we cannot control. The horsemen do not ride in isolation. They are a synchronized chain reaction of human misery. Conquest triggers the ambition that leads to war. War, with its scorched earth and severed supply lines, inevitably births famine. Famine, in turn, weakens the body and the spirit, creating the perfect environment for pestilence and death to take hold. This domino effect illustrates a cycle where one failure cascades into the next, leading to the breakdown of order. It is a closed loop of consequence where the actions of the white horse find their final destination in the cold embrace of the pale horse. Throughout history, this terrifying imagery has transcended the pages of Scripture to haunt the human imagination. Perhaps no artist captured this dread more vividly than Albrecht Dürer. His iconic woodcut from the late 15th century transformed the horseman from abstract theological concepts into a physical, unstoppable force. In his art, the riders are bunched together, a charging wall of destruction that ignores the status or wealth of those beneath their hooves. This visual legacy has bled into our modern era, where the horsemen appear as recurring archetypes in cinema, literature, and gaming. They are the ultimate shorthand for the end of the world, icons of a fate as potent today as it was for John on Patmos. Today, we might not see literal horses on the horizon, but the hoofbeats are felt in the tremors of our modern systems. We live in an era where conquest might take the form of digital dominance or the silent expansion of ideological influence. War is no longer just the clash of swords, but the terrifying shadow of nuclear silos and autonomous drones. Famine manifests in global economic crises where supply chains collapse and inflation strips the value of a day's labor, leaving millions in the grip of food insecurity while the oil and wine of the tech giants remain protected. The pale horse has recently reminded us of its power, as pandemics halt the world and reveal our medical fragility. These are the modern echoes of an ancient warning, suggesting that the horsemen are not just future events, but recurring cycles of the human condition. Crucially, within the narrative of the Book of Revelation, the horsemen are not agents of chaos unleashed by the devil. They are released by the Lamb as he breaks the seals. This theological distinction is profound. It suggests that even in the midst of global catastrophe, there is a sense of divine sovereignty and purpose. The horsemen are mirrors, held up to humanity to reflect the consequences of our own nature. They represent the inherent rot in the pursuit of power and the fragility of a peace built on conquest. To John, the vision was a call to endure, a reminder that despite human ambition, a higher authority presides over history. They teach us that suffering is often the harvest of what we have sown in our quest for dominance. As we look at the world today, the horsemen seem less like characters from a myth and more like the architects of our current reality. They represent the permanent vulnerabilities of being human, our susceptibility to greed, our tendency toward conflict, and our ultimate mortality. Yet, by understanding their meaning, we are invited to look beyond the terror. They challenge us to recognize the patterns of history so that we might strive for a different path. The horses are galloping, and their rhythm is the heartbeat of a world in labor, waiting for a resolution that lies beyond the fourth seal. To understand where we are going, we must look at where we have been and recognize the rider on each horse as they pass through our own time. Which of these figures do you feel is most present in our world today? Is it the rider with the scales of economic hardship, or perhaps the pale horse of global health crises? Reflecting on these ancient symbols might be the only way to hear the hoofbeats before they reach our own doorsteps. Stay vigilant, for the seals are broken, and the riders never truly stop their journey across the earth.